My cousin's out fighting dragons, and what do I get? Guard duty. His fellow Whiterun guards grumbled into their ale, muttering into their tankards about the indignities of being left to defend the city. The soldiers and warriors had all been dispatched by the Jarl, sent in both directions to appease both the Imperials in Solitude and the forces of Ulfric Stormcloak in the east. Whiterun, being stuck right in the middle, was still neutral. With only vagabonds and petty thievery to attend to, the garrison here had grown complacent with their lot. Defending the city was important, sure, but a man didn't get to Sovngarde by locking up drunks. He, like his drinking companions here in the Battered Mare, craved more exotic locations. I used to be an adventurer, one of the grizzled old-timers began to say, his face bright red from drinking. But then you took an arrow to the knee, the rest of the company chimed, familiar with the tale that had been told over and over until it had become something of a joke. He rubbed the old wound as if suddenly pained by it, and didn't laugh with the others. The man downed his ale in one, stumbling towards Hulda for another. In the distance, that insufferable bard Mikal began strumming the opening notes of The Age of Aggression for the 100th time this month. Half the tavern cheered, and the rest booed as he began singing about how great the Imperials were. He tried playing the other version once, but it had ended in several arrests. Maybe Whiterun wasn't as impartial as the Jarl would have us believe. Maybe he'd request The Age of Oppression, just to give his company something interesting to do. "Guard!" a voice shouted suddenly, the door opening with a clatter. The hearthfire flickered in the sudden wind. "I need a guard!" His friends didn't move. They were all off duty after all, and there was always plenty of hold guards outside on the streets. By the divines, there was always a guard stationed in the market, who this man must have passed to get here. He was an orc, so that explained his stupidity. "Let me guess," he chimed, slamming his tankard on the table. He hated orcs. "Someone stole your sweet roll." The orc stumbled into the firelight, his ugly face distraught. "There's been a murder, my brother." "Find someone who cares," the guard said, spitting on the floor next to his feet. His friends, goaded by him, grabbed the orc and threw him onto the street. "No lollygagging," one of them said, laughing as he closed the door. The guard sat back in his chair, staring reflectively into the fire. He was a sworn defender of Whiterun, honor-bound to help anyone in need. If he had been a no-good magic user Dunmer, or even a thieving Khajiit, he would have fulfilled his oath. Orcs, however, were honourless. An orc was the reason he was growing fat here in the Battered Mare, instead of out having his adventure. Many years ago, when Skyrim had been at peace, an orc had stole his sweet rolls. He had been the youngest son of 7, born to a respected warrior family in the city of Falkreath. Times back then had been peaceful, or as peaceful as they had ever been in a country full of Nards. His brothers were all mighty warriors, but none were as mighty as his father, who served as the Jarl's personal bodyguard. Fiercer still his mother, who had died surrounded by a dozen Daedra in a hailstorm of arrows and blood when he was still a boy. The guard knew what his legacy should be. He knew what was expected of him. Yet despite his skill with a sword and bow, there was another path he wished to follow. When he was small, his family had been invited to the Jarl's palace for the mid-year celebration, and the gourmet himself, the most famous chef in Tamriel, would be preparing the feast. The guard had never heard of him until then, because children didn't put much thought into where their food came from. What he did recall, however, was the excitement of every adult around him. He had been caught up in the excitement too, and when the first dish had been served, the entire room had been stunned into silence. The small boy ate the food, stunned that something he ate could bring so much joy. A man had brought a room full of Nords to their knees with his cooking. Some were crying, some looked as if the divines had come down to prepare the meal themselves. The gourmet had more power than any of his brothers or either of his parents. The guard knew that he wanted that power too. He wanted to silence a room with his cooking. And so, as the years passed, he cooked and baked and grew more and more skilled in his craft. His father mocked him, his brothers too, until the day he brought them all to silence with one of his creations. For his 16th name day, instead of a sword, his father got him the gourmet's own cookbook, Uncommon Tastes. The guard learned every recipe, every tip and trick the man had to offer. He began to understand food the way an apothecary knows herbs. Each herb and spice its own character in the fable that was cooking. With his father's blessing, he travelled across Skyrim, cooking in every wayside inn he could. He cooked for adventurers for their campsites, travelling caravans, miners, farmers, even Jarls. His cooking became so famous, he was invited to cook for the High King himself. To make the occasion even more special, he heard rumours upon rumour about the gourmet would be cooking for the king too. The guard returned to his childhood home, desperate to conceive the tastiest recipe to ever come to Skyrim. This was a big chance to stun the world into silence with his prowess as a cook, and in front of his hero no less. His brothers and nephews grew fat as he practiced, until one day he accidentally created a new type of dough. He'd been absently combining ingredients, and had added a pinch from the salt pile and a whole lot of sugar instead of the other way around. Cooking in Skyrim always required a lot of salt, and sweet treats were rare. Not wishing to waste the ingredients, he baked the treats until they were golden brown. His nephews devoured them before they were cool. The guard ate the crumbs and knew that he had invented something that would silence even the mightiest warriors. He called them sweet rolls, and decided to sweeten them further by adding a white icing to the top. Icing was hard to make as it required a special type of sugar, but his years of cooking for caravans and traders had set him up with an extended supply network. Jealously, he guarded his recipe, knowing his ticket to success relied on the exclusivity of these cakes. He could open a bakery right here in Falkreath, or maybe even one in Whiterun or Solitude. If the king liked his cooking, he would be famous as the gourmet himself. So the day grew closer and the guard packed up his wares, the recipe committed to thought in case someone stole the parchment on which it was written and claimed it for themselves. The trip to Solitude was peaceful, yet he could not sleep at night for fear of being robbed. He hired armed guards to keep him safe, refusing to eat or drink anything he did not prepare with his own ingredients. He arrived at last at the palace, armed with baskets full of the finest ingredients to cook for the High King. The kitchen was stocked with every herb, meat, grain, fruit, and vegetable known to the Empire. But what was most impressive was the man preparing to cook next to him. He was an orc, which was shocking at first, but there was no mistaking who he was after watching him cook. The guard felt intimidated. He felt unworthy to stand in the presence of the chef who had inspired him so long ago, but starstruck as he was, he had come to show the world his sweet rolls. Shaking with excitement, he baked dozens upon dozens, each sticky and golden as they cooled upon the rack. He made the icing until it was oozing perfection, slathering it across his creation until he felt like crying with happiness. "What do you call them?" the gourmet asked as he watched them go. "Sweet rolls," he replied breathlessly. The gourmet had actually spoken to him. Beaming, he watched his creations travel to the feast in the arms of the servants, flanked on all sides by his recipe. When the meal had finished, the High King called both Ch.2 to thank them for their work. He held a half-eaten sweet roll in his hand, euphoria clear across his face. "You have outdone yourself with these, gourmet," the king said, taking another bite. "What do you call them?" The guard felt his stomach drop to his feet. "Your Majesty?" "They are sweet rolls, your Majesty," the orc said, pushing the guard back as he stepped forward. "My latest creation." The room applauded loudly, sinking their teeth into their confections, unaware someone's life's work had been stolen before their eyes. "Thief!" the guard shouted, pushing the gourmet hard as he recovered. "Those are my sweet rolls. I created them, not you." The orc laughed, a snorting noise like a pig. "I am the gourmet. Of course I invented them. You are but a lowly cook sent to assist me in this great day. Do not try to steal my work, as so many tried to do." The High King also laughed. "Once again, lesser men tried to ride your coattails, gourmet. Do not take it to heart, my friend. Your day will come, young cook, but it does not do to steal the ideas of others." The guard left the castle, numb and defeated. From that day he swore he'd never cook again, nor would he ever lift a finger to help an orc, or any of the other less than savoury races across Skyrim. Too ashamed to return to his home, he settled in Whiterun, where the sword lessons he had received as a boy were enough to earn him a place in the city watch. Sweet rolls suddenly were the most common treat in Skyrim. The orc had written his own version of the recipe, and included it in the latest rendition of Uncommon Tastes. Every year when the latest edition came to the booksellers, there would be a few new recipes for the masses to exploit. The guard could not help but wonder if these had been stolen also, from naive cooks with big dreams. The years passed and he forgot about the young boy, who had forsaken the path of a warrior for that of a cook. When sweet rolls came to Whiterun, he refused to taste a single crumb, although there were rumours that the artisans in the city paled in their efforts to produce them. He knew he could make the best there was, but he would not. His job now was to protect the city from thieves, and he would see every last thief hang before letting a single coin be wrongfully taken. The orcs, he'd take extra special care of.